현재 전부 저들은 힘이죠. 오늘 물론 전부가 get 다 그렇다는 건 참도 실물도 돈바 둘째 장라 점들로 네 저러 저기 정금스 저 두디션을 해라. 네 반조 장라서란데 공주 도반포를 신지로
To liberate all sentient beings, please give rise to the Supreme Bodhicitta. Now let us continue to learn how to guard awareness. The second point about guarding awareness is guarding the three doors together. This is explained in four aspects. The first of these is observing the three doors, body, speech, and mind. This is further divided into three parts, and the first is observing the actions of the body. The Bodhicharyavatara emphasizes that for those of us who are practicing the Dharma, there are certain requirements regarding our bodily conduct. In the relevant sutras, the Buddha set rather strict standards for both lay and monastic practitioners regarding their deportment in walking, standing, sitting, and lying down. Why is this? It is because our body and mind are interdependent. If we take good care of our body, it naturally supports our efforts in calming and training the mind. Therefore, as practitioners, we should always be mindful of our body and speech. On the other hand, by observing someone's body and speech, we can know their inner state of mind. Of course, it is difficult to tell on the surface whether a person's mind is virtuous or not, or how advanced their practice is. Generally, these things are hard to perceive, but through their body and speech, we can still get a sense of their upbringing and basic character from a worldly perspective, and their level of realization from a Buddhist perspective. Qualities such as great compassion or renunciation, for example, can be reflected in their actions and words. Therefore, especially in the Vinaya Pitaka, the Buddha repeatedly instructed us on how to guard our body and speech. In our modern society, there are always certain requirements for speech and behavior in every formal setting. For example, in social situations or in professional etiquette, whether it is among teachers or civil servants or service staff, there are different standards for proper conduct. However, these requirements are not quite the same as those in the Dharma. For example, in the workplace, all employees are expected to follow certain standards of body, speech, and mind. But the purpose is simply to do the job well. For example, in a hotel, all the hotel staff are well trained, but their purpose is to receive and meet the needs of the guests. But all the requirements the Buddha set in the Vinaya Pitaka are solely for taming our own mind so that we may attain liberation. So the ultimate purpose is quite different. Here we should understand the deportment of the body. For example, the following verses explain this in detail. When we move from one place to another as someone who observes the mind, how should we maintain our deportment and adjust our mind throughout the whole process? This is the main topic explained here, and the verses say, I'll never allow myself to look around in purposeless distraction. With my mind focused, I'll instead look always with my gaze cast down. This verse means that at any time we should not engage in meaningless activities, nor let our mind become distracted by pointless thoughts. It is not appropriate to look around aimlessly or being distracted. Instead, we should keep our mind focused or maintain a firm resolve in our mind. What is this firm resolve? It is to always maintain mindfulness and awareness. This should be reflected in our words and actions. For example, when walking, our gaze should not be too far ahead nor too close. According to the sutras, it should be about 1 yoke's length in front of us. That is roughly about 1 meter as a standard. Then walk slowly and steadily. Maintaining such composure is very meaningful. As I mentioned earlier, as Dharma practitioners, we should first pay attention to our physical and verbal conduct. How should we do this? First, we should reflect. Before doing anything or going anywhere, we should first ask ourselves, does this have real significance for sentient beings, for myself, for this, or for future lives? If it truly has great meaning, then we will proceed. But as we act, we should always maintain proper deportment. We should not look around aimlessly. We should always be steady and dignified. This is something we should never neglect. Even in worldly life, we can also observe people's behavior. For example, those who never discipline themselves will have unsatisfactory behavior, such as the way they walk and everything they do. Through others' actions, we can sense their level of knowledge and inner state. Therefore, the Buddha taught in sutras, such as the Prajnaparamita Sutras, while walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, maintain mindfulness and awareness, and keep your gaze one yoke's length ahead with an undistracted mind. In other words, in all four postures. We must maintain mindfulness and awareness. When walking, gaze our eyes ahead about one yoke's length. Never run about as we please. Such behavior is not appropriate, not only for monastics, but even for worldly people with some education and ethics. So we can see this in daily life as well. Whether it is a monastic, a practitioner, or a lay Buddhist, we can observe from their behavior whether they are in accordance with the Dharma. If their conduct is truly in accord with the Dharma, it indicates that their inner realization is also quite good. In the history of Buddhism, for example, Shariputra was renowned as an exemplary upholder of pure discipline. Among the Buddhist Sangha, Shariputra's deportment was always perfectly in accord with the Dharma. There was also a bhikshu named Ashvajit during the Buddha's time. Among all the disciples of Buddha Shakyamuni, he was also considered outstanding in his observance of discipline. In this degenerate age, it is difficult to emulate them, whose every action was always in perfect accordance with the Dharma. Not to mention ordinary beings in this age, even some arhats at that time would sometimes laugh loudly or run about. Although their afflictions had been eliminated in this life, some habitual tendencies from past lives would occasionally resurface. For some of us practitioners here, to act exactly like an arhat is probably quite difficult. This is understandable. But it is always important to have the courage and ability to observe ourselves. This is extremely important. If we can truly maintain awareness in daily life and keep guarding the three doors, then we will always have the ability to control ourselves. This can be achieved through hearing, contemplation, and meditation. Sometimes when I see in our academy some monastics who have come from monasteries known for their Vinaya studies in Han regions, such as Mount Wutai or Mount Taimu, we can tell from their deportment that this person has studied and understood the Vinaya. Their deportment is very dignified. Whether eating or speaking, we can see that this person must have attended some higher Buddhist institutes in the past. Even in worldly society, it is also apparent. For example, people's words and actions reveal whether they are truly cultured or knowledgeable. Therefore, wherever we are, we should always observe ourselves. If we never observe ourselves and always act according to our own discursive thoughts, then we become someone who is out of control. Such people are often given negative labels. So, everyone should act in accordance with the Dharma. In fact, if our conduct is very proper, we can inspire many others. For example, even non-Buddhists are moved when they see the conduct of Dharma practitioners. When they see the kindness and tranquility of Buddhists, they naturally develop respect and admiration for Buddhists. Therefore, if monastics' deportment is not in accord with the Dharma, many lay people will develop wrong views and then slander the Buddhism. Such slander can lead both oneself and others to fall into unfortunate states. Some lay practitioners may think, I'm a lay people, so I can do whatever I want. But we should not think this way. For example, among the lay people studying this text, everyone knows each other quite well. People know what level others are at and how they behave. It's just that people do not say it to each other's face, but behind there is always a lot of discussion. Everyone knows exactly how others are like. For example, someone has harmonious relationships with Dharma friends. From the way they speak and interact with others and the way they handle things, you can tell this person is truly excellent. Everyone praises and respects them. But for some others who are not welcome by others, most people won't say anything directly, especially if it's something unpleasant, but everyone has their own judgment in their hearts. People feel they cannot get close to such a person, as if near a poisonous snake they might explode at any moment. So it's better to keep some distance before that happens. This is what many people think in their hearts. Therefore, lay practitioners' behavior and physical conduct is extremely important. Even in the past, great masters and accomplished practitioners, as well as great sages in the world, their conduct was completely different from that of ordinary people. This is something we can clearly see. People will notice how comfortable and dignified their deportment is. These great masters inspire in others a sense of admiration. The day before yesterday, 2 monastics came here around noon. I saw them as they entered from the courtyard. Both of them carried themselves with great serenity. After they came inside, their speech also inspired faith. Just seeing them gave rise to confidence. Later, they explained that their monastery was raising funds for construction, and from their behavior, I felt inspired and immediately offered them some money. I gave as generously as I could. After making the offering, they left. I kept watching their behavior as they departed. There was another monastic beside me, and he asked, "You usually ask many questions and like to observe people closely. Why did you so easily just give them money today?" I replied, even though I had never met them before, from this brief encounter, their behavior did not seem like that of a fraud. Nowadays, some people can put on a very convincing act, but I still felt that there was more than a 95% chance that these 2 monastics were not bad people. Whether it was their dress or their usual behavior, my first impression was, oh, this is a good person. This must be a practitioner who has studied proper deportment. That was the feeling I got at first sight. I think many people have this kind of experience, regardless of people's reputation or level of realization. When interacting with certain people, these people's conduct truly attracts countless people to them. This is true for many great masters and accomplished beings of today. Their smile and their proper words and actions can attract countless people. Of course, for a practitioner, the most important thing is realization. If someone has realization, they can inspire tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people. But even if we do not have such realization, I think that truly proper conduct can also help to transform many sentient beings. So, whether we are monastics or lay people, we all represent Buddhism. Wherever we are, there are many people around us. Ordinary people rarely observe themselves. Their first tendency is always to judge others as good or bad. Whether it's their own family or a stranger, they always make such judgments. And in the process of observing, if we leave a bad impression, that impression will always remain in their mind. They will always see us as this kind of person. So we sincerely hope that everyone, whether in walking or speaking, or in our daily actions and interactions, should recognize the importance of proper conduct. As practitioners or Buddhists, it's impossible not to interact with others, but in our speech and actions, we must always show genuine respect for others. However, this respect should not be excessive. For example, if we see someone and immediately start prostrating on the ground, that is not appropriate. We should always have a sense of propriety. This is the mark of a wise person. If we lack moderation or propriety, we may risk falling into extremes. So, everyone should pay attention to their conduct when walking or moving about. Some people have this problem. When others are watching, their deportment is perfectly proper, but as soon as no one is looking, they immediately become a different person. Like an elephant turning into a little monkey. Such behavior is what we call feigning deportment, which it's not good. So, this is something to be mindful of in our Dharma practice. Next, let's continue. But sometimes I might glance about to rest my eyes when they're fatigued. If someone should come into sight, I'll look at them and say, "Hello?" Here, this verse means, earlier we mentioned that whether we are walking or sitting, we should keep our gaze about 1 yoke's length ahead. But sometimes, when our attention is focused on a single object for a long time, our body becomes tired, or our mind can feel fatigued. Especially when our eyes are fixed in one direction, we may start to feel some strain. So to rest and refresh ourselves, it is appropriate to occasionally look around. We should look at whatever places that needs to be seen in our environment. Otherwise, some people who keep their gaze fixed at their meditation, or some people who keep looking straight ahead when walking, may experience dullness or discomfort. So, for the sake of clarity, even now, some people spend all day looking at computers or reading. In the end, their eyes become damaged, or their mind gradually becomes dull and confused. This is not good. We should approach everything skillfully. This is very important. Some people are overly diligent, focusing on one object day and night. After a while, they may develop fatigue or get bored. So here the verse says that we should glance around from time to time to rest our eyes when walking, for the sake of rest and refreshing the mind. At certain points along the way, we can look at our surroundings or at the blue sky and white clouds, or if we are on pilgrimage, we can rest and look around when reaching a pavilion. But while walking, we should not be constantly looking around. I still remember quite clearly, more than 20 years ago, I once went to a monastery near Barkham for summer retreat. The monastery was high up in the mountains, and the journey required climbing for 3 or 4 hours. There was an elderly monastic who had studied at Larungar for over 10 years in his youth. He was very well trained in discipline and deportment. He led the way, and a group of us followed behind him. As we followed, I felt that all his deportment was the same as described in the Vinaya. On the road, he never looked around, always maintaining proper behavior. When we reached the middle of the mountain, we would rest. During the break, he would look around, then we continued on. As we continued, I kept thinking he was able to do exactly as taught in the Bodhicharyavatara. Even though I was there to teach at their monastery, I was still quite young at the time. So sometimes I might have turned my head a bit too quickly. Because there was a very strict person nearby, I always felt a bit uneasy in his presence. Even though I was behind him and he couldn't see me, there were still people behind me. It was a different experience for me. Therefore, we should learn from great masters in history with pure discipline from both Han and Tibetan Buddhism. The conduct of some great masters truly has an impact on our own minds. Seeing their pure and dignified deportment, we naturally feel a sense of shame. We would think, he is a practitioner and so am I, but when he sits, he remains perfectly still without looking around. When he walks, his behavior is always in accord with the dharma, but some of us are not like this. His Holiness used analogies to describe this. Some people, when sitting, are always looking around, much like how some animals observe their surroundings. As everyone knows, if we scatter rice in front of a rooster, its head will dart around in all directions. So, improper behavior is always noticeable. As practitioners, we should understand that deportment is a method for training the mind, because our deportment can directly affect the state of our mind. For example, when someone is very calm and puts their palms together, their mind is also focused and collected. Their gaze is completely focused on their palms. Naturally, their mind is focused on the Buddha statue. For example, if two people go to make offerings before a Buddha statue, one is very focused with palms joined in prayer, while the other is distracted, looking around without proper deportment. Their mental states will be quite different. So our compassionate Buddha set these rules of deportment for us for a reason. Directly or indirectly, they play a very important role in training our minds. So we should not underestimate the importance of our daily conduct. Some people might say, conduct is not important. Only the mind matters. It's most important not to be attached to anything. But often, such people are not attached to virtuous actions, only to unwholesome ones, because they feel it's too tiring to be mindful. So they say, don't be attached. But they often act improperly. So before we reach a certain level of realization, it's best not to make grand statements. Whether in Han Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism, there are truly practitioners whose conduct inspires many others, naturally give rise to faith in the three jewels, have a deeper understanding of life, or make others' pure perception arise naturally and effortlessly. Here the verse says that it is fine to look around at certain times. In daily life, when we are relaxing and see someone approaching us as they come near, we should greet each other with a gentle gaze and kind words. According to Indian tradition, the most polite and respectful greeting is svagata, welcome. In daily life, we might say, hello, you're here. Or in Han Buddhist tradition, Amitabha, you've arrived. In this way, we communicate with each other using respectful language. This is also very important. When we see someone, our first impression is to see if they are nice or not. If we think they are not nice, then regardless of their actions, we can tell from their eyes or other cues. Even if we've never offended them, they may glare at us unfriendly, as if to say, hey you, come here. In fact, we haven't harmed them or done anything, but they still have a very dissatisfied attitude. Naturally, we will develop a different attitude in response. But if the other person is a Bodhisattva with Bodhicitta, they will truly treat everyone just like the great compassionate Buddha did in his past lives, showing no arrogance toward anyone. and seeing themselves as a servant to all sentient beings. I often tell you this, although I can't do it myself, I truly admire it in my heart. Nowadays, some high-end hotels or airline attendants have an attitude that really matches the deportment taught in Mahayana Buddhism. Sir, what do you need? Miss, would you like something to drink? Is there anything I can do for you? Of course, they may not be truly respectful, but their behavior is quite good. If we have generated bodhicitta, to treat everyone this way is truly wonderful. So in our academy, we ask those volunteers to interact with everyone with respect, both in speech and behavior. But in the end, there are all kinds of results. Some people are praised for their loving and compassionate attitude toward others. This is a very high evaluation and truly excellent. But for others, people don't even want to look at them or buy from them. Some people just give off a certain feeling, and there are always such cases. But this is not the opinion of one or two people. Whether someone is nice or not is not determined by a few people. Many people tend to have their own opinions. So I sincerely hope that whether as a layperson or a monastic, in all our interactions with others in the world, even when making a phone call or sitting in a car, try to gradually transform our negative and improper behaviors into more proper attitudes and actions. If we do this, it will naturally help us to tame our own minds and bring real benefit. So I have always believed that as Buddhists, we must first have a foundation of good character. With good character, there is hope in practicing the subtle dharma. If we can't even be a good person, it will be very difficult to practice Buddhism. Some people who lack this foundation think they can't handle worldly matters, but they can immediately attain realization in this very life. This is simply impossible, a pipe dream. It really cannot be achieved. It's just a fantasy. So in daily conversation or when interacting with others, we should always use very respectful language. Of course, there are various ways of speaking in different places. In our academy in the morning, when first meeting someone, people greet each other, "Did you sleep well last night?" And when leaving, they say, "Good night." Sometimes even before noon, people are already saying good night. So these expressions may just be local customs. His Holiness said that in Sarshul, where he studied, whenever friends or guests were leaving, they would always say, "May Guru Padmasambhava bless you." In the biographies of some great Kadampa masters, in the morning they would greet, "Did you have a good dream?" And at night, "May you not have bad dreams," and so on. Customs and traditions may vary from place to place, but in any case we have generated bodhicitta, so we should try our best not to hurt others with our words, even if sometimes we offend someone when our afflictions arise. We should try to confess and regret. After a while, when we have calmed down, we should greet the other person and confess to each other if necessary. So here it is saying that in our daily lives, we should always reflect on how we behave accordingly. Next, it goes on to say, "To know the perils on the road, I'll look in the four directions often. Pausing, I first will turn around before I look behind myself." The verse explains it like this. For example, when people are traveling a long distance, they should first observe what is ahead of them. In India, whether in the forest or between cities, there were often all kinds of dangerous wild animals like tigers, wild elephants, bears, leopards, and so on. There were also threats, such as poisonous snakes, evil people, non-human beings, rakshasas, and so on. So as a practitioner, whether alone or with others, we should first check the place we are going. Are there any obstacles or unfavorable conditions? Are there any unreasonable dangers, such as theft or robbery? We should carefully investigate whether such obstacles exist. If we find there are, we should stop along the way and look carefully in all directions. After checking, if we see there is nothing, then we can continue on our way. This is also shown from the stories of the past, like Master Xuanzang, who traveled to India to collect scriptures. In the history of Tibetan Buddhism, when great masters traveled to India, they encountered elephants, poisonous snakes, pythons, and so on. There are many such stories. From these examples, we can see that as practitioners, whenever we go somewhere, we must first find out if there are any dangers. For example, when people nowadays in the city go to the countryside, they first ask around about the area. Is there a landslide on the road? Has the road collapsed? For example, before going out in the morning, they check if the highway is closed. People often call to check these things first. It is necessary to gather information in various ways, because a wise person always considers everything thoroughly in advance. They never act blindly or impulsively. They don't find themselves regretting their decisions halfway through. Wherever they go, a wise person is always like this. I remember that whenever His Holiness traveled, whether in China or abroad, he would always make sure to understand everything very clearly in advance. For example, if we were going to travel that day, he would ask how many kilometers we needed to go, whether there were hotels along the way, what the conditions were, whether the road was good, what the weather was like. There were always many questions to answer first thing in the morning. So when staying with a master, you always had to be prepared. Sometimes you wouldn't even dare to sleep at night because you might be asked all sorts of questions the next day. You check the calendar, look up information, and figure out the distance from one place to another. If you couldn't answer, master might appear not be very pleased. He might say, "How can you not know how many kilometers it is? Didn't you go there before?" There were situations like this. Traveling with a master is completely different from traveling with others. Wherever you travel with a master, you learn about the local customs, their way of life, the population of the city, and the politics and economy of the area, and so on. You basically gain an understanding of all aspects of that area. So traveling with a wise person is completely different from traveling with someone without wisdom. I truly admire those who can travel with the wise, because even a short journey with them can learn so much. Not to mention the profound realizations in Buddhism, even in worldly matters. Some people are completely clueless. It's as if they were kept in a bag when traveling. For example, if you ask someone, have you been to Lhasa? Yes. But if you ask about Lhasa or how far it is, they don't know. I just went there to make prostrations and came back. They have no idea about these details. So it's best to become a realized being, if not at least be a person with some wisdom. You should broaden your horizons and have knowledge. Otherwise, you'll just be muddled and confused. Living in such confusion, life can be very uncomfortable. Perhaps my advices are unnecessary, but as Mahayana practitioners, we cannot just focus on our realization and ignore everything else in the world. It's not reasonable. So sometimes when we stop to rest, look around in all directions, or check if there are any tigers behind us, or if there are any robbers. If we don't look and just keep walking forward, maybe a tiger or an elephant could come from behind and eat us. We never know. So sometimes it's good to stop and check. So sometimes stop and look back. Check if there are any thieves or other bad people behind us. It's wise to look back sometimes. If we see that everything is fine and safe, then we can continue on our way. That's the idea. Now moving on to the next verse. Having thus looked ahead and behind, I'll then proceed or else return. In every situation, I will act knowing the necessity. So as mentioned before, we should carefully look around to know the dangers on the road. After thorough observation, if you find that there are no obstacles, then you can continue moving forward. But if you sense that there might be something undesirable could happen on the path, then you should immediately change your route. For example, if you hear that there's a landslide ahead, or that there are some bad people, since there are all kinds of robbers and bandits nowadays, in such cases, you should either not go today or choose another direction to proceed. According to Tokme Zangpo's explanation, or as some other commentators say, they teach the same thing. In all situations or in all our actions, in the 4 types of deportment, walking, standing, sitting, and lying down, this verse summarizes the proper rule we should follow. In our actions and in every situation, I will act knowing the necessity. Consider whether our actions are truly necessary. The most important thing is whether it is beneficial to ourselves and to sentient beings. Whatever we do, wherever we go, we must first examine carefully. We should never just follow others blindly. Don't say, yes, I'll go right away, and rush off after them. That is the behavior of someone without discernment. As His Holiness often said, before doing anything, whether it's speaking or acting, we should never act recklessly. Instead, we should carefully and properly examine ourselves, calm our minds, and only act after careful consideration. This is what His Holiness often reminded us. Therefore, whatever we do, whether it's business, running a shop, or just going out, when people wake up in the morning, they may think about where to go that day. But before going, first consider whether it is meaningful. If it is truly meaningful for ourselves and others, then we can decide to go. If we feel it is meaningless, if it's for excitement or even for something improper, then we should restrain ourselves and not go. As a Buddhist, we should think this way. From beginningless time until now, we have wandered in samsara, engaging in unwholesome actions. If we still cannot control ourselves now, how will we ever attain liberation in the future? So it's better to spend time reading and memorizing dharma texts and practicing virtuous actions. We should set standards for ourselves. This is very necessary. So here, in all our actions, we should consider whether it will benefit sentient beings. In the past, before doing anything, Kadampa masters, especially as Mahayana practitioners, would always first consider whether their actions would benefit sentient beings. This was always their main motivation. Some people may ask, for example, as ordinary people, how do we know when we can truly benefit others? When will we not be influenced by external circumstances? When can we tell? On this point, here is my view. After a long period of hearing, contemplation and meditation, eventually you will gain confidence that you will not be tainted by external circumstances. Of course, it is quite difficult that your self-centeredness and self-grasping are eliminated to liberate beings. However, whenever you feel that you are going to the city to teach the Dharma, not for wealth or fame, and that you can maintain self-control, relying on the Dharma not to do anything wrong, and your motivation from beginning to end is to benefit sentient beings. If you have such unwavering confidence, then it is appropriate to go and benefit sentient beings. In the past, some great masters have said, when you see your teacher as the Buddha, and when you feel boundless compassion for all sentient beings, then you are ready to benefit others. We should also think in this way. When you have sufficient compassion and your actions are generally not easily influenced by others, then you should do your best to benefit sentient beings, especially if your purpose is not for money. Nowadays, many people use Dharma activities as a way to make money. This is a very serious fault. In the Buddhist scriptures, it is said that among the 10 non-virtuous actions, using the Dharma as a means of livelihood or treating the Dharma as a commodity to make a living is considered a very serious fault. So, as Buddhists, we should be especially mindful of this. Now, today's final verse. Beginning endeavors with the thought, with body, I will stay like this. I'll then occasionally examine how is my body situated. This verse tells us that whenever we are about to do anything or settle into any posture with our body, first, we should always observe ourselves with mindfulness and awareness. Should I really do this? Am I settled properly? This is the first thing to check. Then, in the next stage during the process, we should occasionally observe how our deportment is or how our body is settled. In short, at all three stages, the beginning, middle, and the end of any activity, we should examine the three doors with awareness. Always ask ourselves, what is my body doing right now? For example, as Khenpo Kunpal's commentary says, if we want to train our mind, we should meditate on Bodhicitta for half an hour in the morning. Whether it's at 6 or 5 in the morning, as soon as we begin our practice, we should think, now I am going to meditate on Bodhicitta. My body should be in the posture of resting in the nature of mind, or in the 7-point posture of Vairochana. This is how we should settle our body at the beginning. Then, after about 15 minutes, check our state of mind. Is our mind still focused on bodhicitta? Has our body slumped over? Are we lying down? If so, that's not appropriate. We should readjust our deportment and our sitting posture. At the end, when we finish our session, reflect on how we sit, how our mind is, and how our body is settled. Even if it is just half an hour, it's meaningful if we have practiced properly. We don't doze off and keep thinking of the suffering of sentient beings, and we generate strong compassion in our heart. Then practicing like this every day will have results. In the end, we will also feel joy. No matter what we do, these three attitudes are very important. For example, when committing a negative action, at first you have the intention to harm a sentient being, then in the middle you clearly recognize your target. I am killing John, not Kim. And after completing the act, you feel satisfied. When these three attitudes are present, the negative action is complete. In the same way, when we do virtuous deeds, Whether it's meditation or any good action, we also need these three attitudes. Today, if I meditate on bodhicitta, or go to teach the dharma, or listen to teachings. From the beginning, I leave home to attend the teaching. I set my motivation. I am listening to the dharma for the sake of sentient beings. Then, during the teaching, how is our mind and body? Did we still keep the motivation we had when we left home? Or are we now dozing off or feeling distracted? Or are we waiting for the class to end, checking our watch? Such attitudes are not good and should be corrected. Then, after the teaching is over, we should think, I have finished the class with a mind to benefit beings. Then dedicate the merit to all sentient beings. If your motivation is virtuous at the beginning, middle, and end, your practice is complete. Of course, as ordinary people, it's impossible not to have any self-centered thoughts at all. But as long as your mind is mostly turned toward virtue, there is great merit. I remember that when teaching the Bodhicharyavatara, His Holiness also explained it this way. For example, from our institute to Nubzo Township is 3.5 kilometers. Today, I plan to go to Nubzo Township to benefit sentient beings or to receive guests. As I set out today, I should resolve not to do anything unwholesome during the whole journey. This is the motivation I set at the start. Then, when I reach about 1.5 kilometers at the lay Buddhist quarter, I should recall the motivation I made when I left home. And now, am I still maintaining the intention not to do anything unwholesome? Finally, when I return, I should reflect. This trip was quite successful. I didn't encounter any obstacles, nor did I do anything unwholesome. If you can maintain this attitude, it means your body is always being protected by awareness. With awareness, you will certainly have mindfulness of virtue, This is the meaning here. So for those studying the Bodhicharyavatara, at the beginning, you may want to join a Bodhicharyavatara study group. In the middle, you should check if you are still able to continue. In the end, I believe that one day you will definitely finish the entire Bodhicharyavatara. As long as everyone's faith remains, it will surely happen. It is extremely important if your motivation is virtuous at the beginning, middle, and end. Your actions throughout the process are also in accordance with the Dharma. It is very important to keep having this awareness. If you don't observe yourself like this in the middle, it's very likely that some unwanted thoughts will arise and your body may go somewhere else entirely. In this way, you may be led away from Buddhism or develop attitudes that are meaningless for this and future lives. That would be truly unfortunate. So everyone must remember that it is extremely important to always protect yourself with mindfulness and awareness. All right, we'll stop here for today.
Bandara